Welcome back, everyone. Our next session is on citizen science. So this is how we are learning from you, from your data contributions, and the ways that your contributions help impact what we're learning and how we think about Duchenne and Becker. And so for this session, our two speakers are going to be Dr. Shannon Grabich from Sarepta and Ann Martin from PPMD. If you'd like to come to the stage.
All right, excellent. Thank you for the introduction, Eric. As he said, I am Dr. Shannon Grabich. I am an epidemiologist at Sarepta. And at Sarepta, I do a lot of real-world evidence. So that's kind of outside of clinical trials, what happens in the real world. And so I'm going to kind of introduce real-world evidence and partnership between PPMD and Sarepta. And then Anne is going to talk about one of our partnership studies using the Duchenne registry. So big picture, real-world evidence is a common goal between PPMD and Sarepta. And in 2018, this partnership launched the Duchenne Outcomes Research Interchange. And the interchange is a way for us to share and work with real-world data. So really quickly, I am a teacher at heart, so I start with kind of what is real-world evidence. So real-world evidence is really any evidence that's coming outside of your clinical trial or your development kind of environment. So when I say real-world, I think of anything within the realm of patient report, anything that's happening in a commercial environment, anything that's happening outside a clinical trial. And that data can be incredibly valuable to understand long-term safety, effectiveness, and a big part of that is the patient perspective. So as you know, the Duchenne registry is all patient caregiver perspective data, and as part of the interchange, we can layer different things together, such as patient voice, data that comes from different registries, as well as our EVOLVE Phase 4 study. So what does this really mean? So what we're doing with PPMD and Sarepta's partnership is we're looking at the science that comes out of the real world holistically. So this includes looking at the Duchenne registry, which is patient and caregiver report, and alongside clinically reported data. So any data that lives kind of within the interchange, like that graphic to the right as an example, is anonymized and can be looked at together. And the benefit of that is that if you've participated in patient surveys or something with PPMD, we can look at it alongside other data, combine it in a way so that we can get clinical and patient perspective together. And that's really important. We hear more and more, even from regulatory, that they want to hear the patient voice. They want that patient caregiver perspective, and that's something that Sarepta is committed to making sure we have, especially in the space I work in real-world evidence, which is what's actually happening after a drug is approved, and also what's happening in natural history. Because if you don't have the context of what's happening in the natural history, then you don't know what's happening, especially as we move into more approvals and different things being approved on the market. And then we say combinations, which have been discussed. And the more that's out there, the more we need real world evidence to understand what's happening. So very quickly, and I know at this conference you will hear lots of plugs for the Duchenne registry, and it's something that I work on the interchange with and is near and dear to my heart to get that patient perspective. But part of what I work on is the EVOLVE Phase 4 study at Sarepta, which began in 2019, and it looks at patients that have been treated with exon skip amenable therapy, PMOs. And the goal of that is to look at data that is beyond the clinical trial in the real world. So looking at data that is far beyond and really to understand what happens as our Duchenne boys and men and grow and kind of progress through. The registry, of course, has existed far longer than our study, but it has the ability with those 5,000 registrants and growing to be able to overlap with the EVOLVE study and, again, come up with insightful clinical and patient-reported data. So I'm going to pivot now to Anne, who's going to talk about one of our research collaborations that we're really excited to talk about today.
All right. Well, thank you, Shannon. Yeah, so I'm Ann Martin. I'm PPMD's VP of Community Research and Genetic Services, and I'm very excited to be here today to talk about this collaborative study we did with Sarepta, really digging into the pain interference data that we have within our Duchenne registry. So as Shannon mentioned, we've been collecting data for a long time in the Duchenne registry, actually for over 15 years. But the pain module or the pain survey actually wasn't added until 2016. And that's when we had actually received funding from a group called PCORI. And they were very interested in adding various patient-reported outcome measures, validated measures to our registry. I'm not sure if anybody has heard of the PROMISE validated pain measure, but that is actually like the questions that are within our pain survey are directly taken from the PROMISE measure, and that is the patient-reported outcomes measurement information system. So they have a whole catalog of validated PROs that you can use. So within our pain survey, we have questions that are specific for pediatric registrants versus adult registrants. And as we started this study, we thought it would be interesting to send an email to all of our registrants and just ask for statements about how pain has affected your life, either as an adult with Duchenne or Becker, or as a caregiver who's caring for a child with Duchenne or Becker. And I just used one quote in here. This is from a mother who states, "My son is 30 and his pain is being managed with gabapentin. We have noticed sleep disturbances that we think are pain-related, and we believe his pain has been hard for him to articulate." And I imagine it's probably true for many in the audience. So the objectives of our pain study, was to describe the reported prevalence of pain interference on daily activities and the level of interference among both pediatric registrants, as well as adult registrants who are living in the United States and in our Duchenne registry. And we also wanted to see if there were differences between patient-reported pain interference versus caregiver-reported. And I did want to note, in case any of you might not be familiar with the term pain interference, that is not a direct measure of the presence or absence of pain, but instead measures how pain interferes with your daily living. And one other important point, I should actually go back. I don't have this on the slide, but another reason why this study is so important is that there's actually very limited published U.S. data on pain in the Duchenne population, and that's really important not only for healthcare providers, but also for payers to understand basically the patient experience with respect to pain. So for our study population, I think those of you who are in the registry know that we have many surveys within the registry. So of course, the survey of most interest for this study was our pain survey. So in order for us to use your data, we needed to have a completed pain survey. We also needed the About Me survey completed, and that's the survey where we gather all of your demographic and diagnosis information. So once we identify those registrants who had both of those surveys completed and valid, and then we narrowed down to those living in the United States and those with a diagnosis of Duchenne. We ended up with 899 unique and eligible survey respondents for this study. The majority were caregiver responses of pediatric patients, so that was about 68%. The average age that the survey was taken was around 12 years of age, and the average reported age at diagnosis was 4.5 years of age. I do just want to take a minute to thank all of you in the audience, and anyone who might be listening at home. If you participate in the Duchenne registry, we really want to thank you for taking the time and effort to complete these surveys. It really means a lot. And just want to point out that your data is really, truly valuable, and we could not do any of these studies if you didn't participate. So thank you. So I'm really going to provide just a very high-level summary of the data that was found. So this slide, apologies, is very busy, but it's focusing on the pediatric pain interference survey. And basically what we found, which is very interesting, was that the self-reported pain interference was consistently higher in the pediatric population than the caregiver reported. So I'm not sure if you can read any of the table there, but basically 68% of caregiver reports and 76% of self-reports indicated some level of pain interference in at least one of the 6 pain categories. And they're listed there in the table if you can read them. I felt angry when I had pain. I had trouble sleeping when I had pain. It was hard for me to pay attention when I had pain, and so on. The category, it was hard to have fun when I had pain, actually had the greatest proportion of patients for both self-reports and caregiver reports who reported pain. And then when we looked at the adult cohort, we actually found the opposite. So with the adult population, the self-reported pain interference was lower than caregiver reported. So it's interesting that it was an opposite pattern than what we observed in the pediatric population. So 67% of caregiver reports versus 60% of self-reports indicated at least some level of pain interference. And the highest proportion of patients reported some degree of pain interference with their enjoyment of everyday life. And then when we stratified by ambulation, we're not really able to do anything with the adult data in terms of ambulation because our numbers were low between ambulatory and non-ambulatory. So this slide is really focused on the pediatric responses stratified by ambulation. But what we found here is that pediatric self-reported pain interference was actually higher for the ambulatory boys versus non-ambulatory. But it was opposite for caregiver reported. So caregiver reported pediatric self-reported pain interference was actually higher in the non-ambulatory group. So interesting finding there. So the results that we found, just in summary, we found that both patients and caregivers are reporting at least some level of pain interference. Most notable, the pediatric patients report that pain interferes with their ability to have fun, and that they feel angry when they have pain, while adult patients report that pain interferes with their enjoyment of everyday life. For the pediatric self-report showed higher pain interference across all metrics compared to caregiver report, and then the opposite trend was observed with the adult cohort. And I do want to point out, this isn't on my slide here because this study focused only on Duchenne registrants, but we had a meeting earlier in the week focused on Becker patients, and we actually found within our registry that adults with Becker reported even higher pain interference than those with Duchenne on several of the categories. And we've also looked at pain in our manifesting carrier population, and that was in our 15-year report that came out last summer. But it appears that manifesting carriers report a significant amount of pain as well. So just in summary, it's really important to bring the patient voice into these real-world studies, and it's just crucial for us understanding the quality of life in Duchenne. I think I have one last slide. Again, I just want to thank everyone who participates in the registry. If you don't participate in the registry, I encourage you to please join. Go to DuchenneRegistry.org or find myself or any of the genetic counselors on my team. We're all happy to help you. I think a lot of our fund table has maybe had to be dismantled, but we're still all here and can help you. And also a big thanks to Sarepta Therapeutics for having an interest in this topic and wanting to partner with us for this study. So we really appreciate their work. I'm not sure, I might have like a few seconds for questions, if there are any questions.
About the registry, now that you've gone to app-based, how do we add test results?
So within the registry, you can take a picture of your genetic test report and upload that through the registry. But if you'd rather not do that, you can still email it or fax it to us. So, and we can load it on the back end for you.
So there is a link on the app?
Yeah, it's a survey that says submit genetic test report. And you click on that, and then it connects with your camera, and you can take a picture of your genetic test report.
Yeah, because I hadn't been active on the registry for about the last 7, 8 years,
That's okay.
and a lot of has happened.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that all of my cardiac results and all my other tests that I've ever done is accurately on the registry, because
Okay.
I know how important that data is for future research.
Yes, definitely. And if it's easier, again, for you to email it to us, we're happy to do that for you. So
Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay, I think we are going to move to our polling session, and this session ties nicely into the polling questions. So I will wait for that to pop up. I think you guys are probably pros at the polling now, but if you're not, just get out your phone or any device and go to pollev.com/ppmd. We'll give you all a minute to get to that site. I feel like I need some Jeopardy music here as we wait. All right, so yes, the first question, and this, I only want people in the audience who are living with Duchenne or Becker or carriers. You can answer for this question as well. In the past 7 days, how much did pain interfere with your daily activities? All right. I'll give everyone another minute or so. And again, this is only for those in the room with Duchenne or Becker or who are carriers. All right. I'm glad to see that it looks like, it's moving. So does look like the largest percentage is not at all, but definitely those, the quite a bit and very much are also each at 8%, which you hate to see, and somewhat is not ideal either, and that's at 31%. All right, it's still moving. All right, I think we can move to the next question. So this is the same question, but for everyone else in the audience. So for those of you here that do not have Duchenne or Becker and you're not a carrier, how much, in the past 7 days, how much did pain interfere with your daily activities? It's interesting to watch these bars move. Yeah, and I think definitely the not at all category was much higher for this group versus our Duchenne and Becker group. But I realize there's probably a lot of caregivers in the audience who may not necessarily be a carrier, but just being a caregiver, I realize could probably increase the amount of pain you may feel. So this certainly isn't like an ideal study, but just getting a snapshot. All right. I think we can move to the next question. For people living with Duchenne or Becker, how many times per week do you have physical therapy? I like seeing all the daily. That's awesome. All right. Wow, so daily and once per week. Well, no, it looks like once per week is winning. All right. That's interesting to see. Very good. And I think we might have one last fun question for everybody. And I have to admit, I did not know the answer to this, but a group of flamingos is called what? I would have said a flock, but, oh, and I just told you it's not flock, so. I'm not very good at this polling. All right, you guys are smarter than me. Yes, the correct answer is D, flamboyance. So, yeah, there you go. Everyone's learned something today now. All right. Well, thank you all very much for listening to this session. And again, I just have to put a plug in for the registry. Please join if you have not joined yet. And if you're already in the registry, make sure you get your account updated, and we're happy to help.